Ippo's retirement is the result of a combination of many factors. It wasn't like he suddenly woke up one day and magically suffered brain damage. No, this was years in the making. The damage piled up over countless fights and it never got the proper care or attention it deserved. That's exactly why many fans point the finger at Coach Kamogawa when talking about Ippo's retirement. Kamogawa has always said that his #1 goal as a coach is to make sure his boxers step out of the ring in the safest condition possible. But in Ippo's case, that clearly wasn't what happened. By the time it became obvious that something was wrong with Ippo's body, the damage had already been done. So in this video we're going to break it all down, where it truly began, the exact moments in his career when Ippo may have sustained irreversible brain damage, and the critical points where Kamogawa could have stepped in to change the outcome. But when you look back closely, this wasn't a sudden tragedy, it was a slow burn that could have been prevented. The best way to show where Ippo truly began collecting serious damage in his body was at the very start of the Pacific Champion arc. At that point, Kamogawa wanted Ippo to start making his way toward challenging Ricardo Martinez for the world title, especially after Ippo's long anticipated fight against Miyata was called off. That meant Ippo needed to first become the uncrowned OPBF champion, so he set his sights on challenging the top champions across the Pacific. And that's when it all began. Ippo's first fight was against Jimmy Sisfa, a match that played out like a typical Ippo fight. There was nothing pretty about it, just pure white slugging back and forth like cavemen, trading heavy shots until things got brutal at the end. In other words, standard Ippo, face blocks, head-on exchanges and non-stop straight punches. It was already worrying to see him taking that kind of punishment so early in this arc, but things got even worse in the next match in his brutal fight against Gedo. This fight made absolutely no sense from a strategic standpoint, but let's put it aside and focus on what Ippo actually went through in it. For multiple rounds, for several minutes at a time, Ippo was getting slaughtered, eating a jab after jab and somehow surviving Gedo's dangerous uppercuts. No matter what Gedo threw at him, Ippo refused to go down, relying purely on his insane willpower to keep going. And what did Kamogawa do? He just stood there watching the fight unfold, unable to come up with a proper strategy for Ippo to turn the tables. Instead of cutting the losses, swallowing his pride and accepting the defeat, he kept sending Ippo back into the ring, hoping for some miracle to turn around. Then, out of nowhere, Aoki figured out what Gedo's trick was. He had been slightly loosening his gloves. But instead of telling Ippo directly and clearly, they turned it into some kind of a riddle for him to figure out in the middle of the fight, which was so damn stupid, man. By the time Ippo finally caught on, he was already completely wrecked. Kamogawa, now with no other choice, was ready to throw in the towel in shame. But just as he was about to, he saw that Ippo still refused to give up, and he literally pulled the towel back mid-air. Ippo ended up winning the match in the end, but the truth is he took massive, avoidable damage in this fight. Damage that should never have happened if his corner had acted smarter. The next and final champion of the Pacific arc was Wally, a fighter no one could have predicted will turn into a machine in the ring after only 3 professional fights. I can understand why, at the start, Ippo's camp had way too much confidence that they could beat him. After all, Ippo managed to drop Wally in the very first round, and Wally was still inexperienced at that stage. But as the rounds went on, things took a turn. Ippo could do absolutely nothing, eating punches for entire rounds without being able to mount any kind of offense. At that point, his corner should have stopped the fight. Instead, Kamogawa gave Ippo an ultimatum. If Ippo could at least land even a light tap on Wally in a round, he could keep fighting. By the end, Ippo looked like he could collapse dead at any second. Kamogawa almost threw in the towel yet again, but Ippo still refused to give up. He kept pushing forward, landing few smaller shots on Wally here and there, and with time he began to chip away. Eventually he turned the tide and secured the win. But the cost was brutal. Right after his victory, Ippo collapsed unconscious on the canvas. After the fight, Wally's coach met with Kamogawa. He first congratulated them on their victory, but then gave a serious warning. If Kamogawa and Ippo didn't change their approach, they were cooked. Ippo's stubborn, damage-heavy fighting style wasn't going to last forever, and continuing down the path would eventually break him for good. Next came Ippo's fight against Kojima, and I have to say, Kamogawa couldn't couldn't have possibly predicted it would end the way it did. The only real criticism I have here is that he should have crafted a proper strategy for Ippo instead of just letting him take the lead and figure things out himself. Ippo was ranked 7th in the world and was dangerously close to securing a potential fight against Ricardo Martinez. All he needed was one final push to get an official title shot, so Kamogawa recommended taking on Alfredo Gonzalez, the 2nd ranked boxer, a man who had only ever suffered 2 losses, both at the hands of Ricardo himself. A win here would be monumental for their camp. Ippo entered the fight determined, ready to give it his all as always. But both he and Kamogawa were quickly humbled by Alfredo's style. In the first half of the match, Ippo couldn't do a single thing against him. It was only after Alfredo fully let his rage loose that he was able to inflict any damage at all. Unfortunately, Kamogawa failed to recognize Ippo's limits. He underestimated the fact that while Ippo's willpower is monstrous, his body still has boundaries. Pushing past them without a plan would only come at a steep cost. That's why Kamogawa remembered the conversation he had with Wooly's coach, warning them that they were heading straight into disaster again. And sure enough, Ippo ended up losing in a brutal way, which shocked Kamogawa, but in the end he was there to comfort Ippo. After that fight, Ippo's performance started to noticeably decline. He couldn't even keep up with what would normally be easy training. Because of that, the gym banned him for training to let him fully recover. They also ran a series of tests to check if he had any lingering damage, testing things like whether he could ride a straight line or maintain his balance. Ippo passed those tests, but after a 10-month hiatus, he returned for what would be his final fight. Ippo had already promised that if he lost one more time, he would quit boxing altogether. But what Ippo really planned was to use the fight just to show the world the new Dempsey roll that he and Kamogawa had created. Because deep down he knew he couldn't keep going. In the last fight, he just wanted to show off the Dempsey roll one final time. Ippo was so fixated on showing this move that his performance suffered. He could have easily won if he hadn't been so focused on it. After Ippo went down with a glancing blow to the chin, Kamogawa saw the writing on the wall and wanted to end the match immediately. But he also knew Ippo still wanted to show something, so he gave him the chance to finish the fight. But in the end though, Ippo lost. It's clear that if Ippo had lost earlier in his career, Kamogawa would have thrown in the towel for him. But that loss would have been a chance for Ippo to improve and come back stronger. Unfortunately, that opportunity never came. Instead, Ippo kept pushing forward despite the damage, and that's what eventually led to his forced retirement. This shows just how much the team overlooked the toll his fighting took on his body, and why Kamogawa must take responsibility for not stopping him sooner. If you've enjoyed this video, then please leave a like and subscribe to my Instagram for more Ippo comics. I'm the Reading Crow, and thanks for watching.